So what do you say, Commissioner? Do we have a deal?
The Kingpin may be the deadliest crime lord in all of New York, but if there's one person he'll bow down to, that'll be his wife, Vanessa Fisk. The new show Daredevil Born Again brings back Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, and Ailette Zurer as his wife Vanessa. Pretty early on in the series, it's established that Vanessa and Wilson are an estranged couple now, and are on very different paths. Vanessa has taken over Wilson's criminal empire during his absence, and running it like a boss, while Wilson wants to pursue a career in politics. In fact, by the end of the second episode, he wins the campaign and becomes the mayor of New York. However, Vanessa's constant absence from Wilson's public appearance isn't good for his image, and a reconciliation is a must, so they secretly seek couples counseling from Heather Glenn, who is none other than the new love interest of the superhero Daredevil, Wilson Fisk's arch enemy. Sounds interesting, right? Yep, Vanessa indeed is an interesting character, and we'll tell you more about her in this video. So let's get started, shall we? Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Vanessa Fisk in Daredevil, Born Again. We meet Vanessa Fisk for the first time when she tackles the Five Family, a group of criminals, squabbling over taxes, sternly saying good behavior is expected when she's heading the gathering. Soon enough, the meeting is interrupted by the arrival of Wilson Fisk, and it seems that Wilson and Vanessa are seeing each other for the first time, after a really long hiatus. You have kept them in line, says Wilson Fisk, confirming that Vanessa has been running his criminal empire like a boss lady in his absence. Their conversation also reveals that Vanessa was constantly by his side when Wilson Fisk was seriously injured from the events that unfolded in the TV show Hawkeye. He was shot in the face point blank by his adopted niece, Maya Lopez, otherwise known as the vigilante Echo. But after his recovery, he cut ties with his close ones to recuperate from the trauma and come back stronger, and apparently as a changed man to alter the fate of New York through politics and not crime. The Kingpin professes his undying love for Vanessa, saying he cannot be associated with anything illegal if he's to continue as the mayor. But Vanessa is now a bit too busy running the underworld operations, which she's turned into a bigger, stronger, and more profitable crime empire. A bulletproof business, were her exact words. So there's a conflict of interest here. Wilson wants a clean image for his mayoral campaign, but his wife Vanessa is a full-fledged mob boss now. However, it could also work in Wilson's favor that while he runs the city as mayor, Vanessa runs his underworld dealing. Best of both worlds. Anyhow, Wilson's mayoral campaign director points out that Vanessa's resistance to being part of Wilson's political journey is hurting his chances with the traditional voters. Wilson decides to repair his relationship with Vanessa by seeking out a professional therapist, Dr. Heather Glenn. Wilson is even willing to let go of Vanessa's involvement with a certain character named Adam. In therapy, Vanessa reveals that with her business acumen, the Kingpin's crime empire thrived, but she also deeply missed her husband. But now that he's back, she doesn't know how to feel about that, and Wilson says he is ready to do whatever it takes to get his wife back. Who is Vanessa Fisk? What is Vanessa Fisk's background? Now, let's talk about Vanessa Fisk's comic book history. The character first appeared in a cameo in Amazing Spider-Man's issue number 7 in 1968. Vanessa finally made her full-fledged comic book debut in issue number 83 of the series in 1970. Vanessa's early life was a bit tragic. She was just 15 years old when Wilson Fisk was already running his crime empire. She was enslaved by Wilson's goon and produced in front of the crime boss, who instantly saw through the lost and amnesiac Vanessa and realized her true nature to be one of grace and undying spirit. Wilson, who always longed for a partner with a strong will, eventually developed a deep bond with Vanessa, and the two got married pretty soon. Wilson and Vanessa's love story is detailed in the 1986 graphic novel Daredevil Love and War No. 1. How was Vanessa Fisk's relationship with the Kingpin? Just as we see in the TV show, Vanessa Fisk loved the Kingpin with all her heart, but she wasn't a fan of his brutal and violent ways, even in the show. Vanessa mentions that during the Kingpin's absence, she has developed a better relationship with the Five Families, one of loyalty and respect, and not one of terror. Anyhow, so in the comic, they get married and become parents to a boy named Richard. However, during her pregnancy, Vanessa was so troubled by the violence and crime-riddled world of the Kingpin that she once tried to end her pregnancy by piercing a needle into her baby bump, but Richard was born. And once he was older, the couple decided to ship him away to Switzerland to study, away from the Kingpin's world of violence and crime. Richard studied hard to make his parents proud and bragged about his dad's affluence to his fellow students, unaware that his father is the king of New York's underworld. When Richard learnt about his dad's true identity, he began acting out and disappeared in the wilderness of Switzerland, never to be seen again. He was believed dead, but Richard created a secret identity called the Shimmer and returned to New York to dethrone his father and grab a piece of his crime empire. And this is when Richard faced the wrath of Vanessa, who thwarted the efforts of his scheming son to save Wilson and his empire. The Kingpin saw the love and dedication Vanessa had for him and became all the more possessive about it. But he was heartbroken when Vanessa went missing and was believed to be lost and dead for months. Enters Daredevil, whose investigation led him to the sewers of New York City, where the grotesque creature called the King of the Sewer had held Vanessa captive. The king had murdered his own queen and replaced her with Vanessa. The king even removed Vanessa's wedding ring from her finger to establish her marriage with him. Anyhow, Daredevil rescued Vanessa and reunited her with Wilson Fisk as part of a deal. The deal was that in exchange for rescuing Vanessa, that Kingpin would ask his corrupt mayoral candidate, Randolph Cherry, to step down and confess his ties to the criminal world. Vanessa continued to face constant threats from the Kingpin's adversary, and fearing that he would lose Vanessa again, the Kingpin decided to hire lookalike actresses to impersonate his wife, so that the real Vanessa could not be kidnapped again, and Wilson wouldn't be extorted for. Unfortunately, one such actress named Heidi Devato died after being kidnapped by the fierce warrior Micah Sin. By this time, Vanessa had developed a cold and calculating personality and also became competent in the use of firearms. Having spent years dealing with Kingpin's criminal empire, seeking solace, she once decided to part ways with Wilson and move away to Switzerland. But when Richard made an attempt on Wilson's life again, she promptly returned to New York to tackle the menace that her son was. Richard and an old friend, Sammy Silk, who initially worked for Wilson, teamed up to assassinate Wilson. While Wilson survived the attempt, Vanessa was furious and launched an all-out war against everyone who was involved in the plan. She even went to the extent of murdering a talent broker named Falzo, who had a minute role to play in the assassination attempt. She eventually faced Richard and realized Richard would always be a threat to Wilson. After yelling at him about how big a disappointment he was, the grieving mother ended up killing Richard, racked with guilt and believing Wilson would never spare her for killing their son. Vanessa split up the empire while Wilson was recovering and left for Europe again, determined never to return. When Vanessa was diagnosed with a terminal illness, she slipped into depression and blamed Wilson's criminal activities and Daredevil's attempts to stop them for all the violence and tragedy in her family. Determined to wrap up unfinished business before her impending death, Vanessa started running an operation in New York to trouble both Wilson and Daredevil. She faked the death of Daredevil's longtime friend Foggy Nelson so that the vigilante would go after Wilson. She even hired Iron Fist to impersonate Daredevil and got him to wreak havoc in Daredevil's neighborhood Hell's Kitchen. Vanessa also got the supervillain Tombstone to kidnap Lily Luca, a woman Daredevil-like, to set the vigilante on a wild chase across Europe. Vanessa's efforts eventually led to the arrest of the Kingpin and the Daredevil by the FBI. Vanessa was eventually confronted by the Daredevil when she owned up to her scheme, but also shared her dying wish with him. After her death, Daredevil honored her last wish and worked towards getting the charges against the Kingpin dropped, but in exchange for Wilson giving up his U.S. citizenship and never returning to his criminal activity. But despite Vanessa's efforts to free Wilson from the dark underworld, he did return to New York briefly to tie a few loose ends. How was Vanessa Fisk resurrected, and what happened afterward? You'll be surprised to know that Vanessa Fisk's death wasn't the end of this character in Marvel Comics. Years after she died, Vanessa's corpse was procured by the villainous ninja clan, the Hand. They went on to resurrect Vanessa and controlled her into attacking her husband Wilson Fisk to test whether the Kingpin still had it in himself to be a worthy criminal, as the Hand wanted to appoint Wilson Fisk as their leader. While Wilson fought the resurrected Vanessa, he also desperately asked her to show signs that the old Vanessa still exists somewhere within her, as he didn't want to kill her. But following Vanessa's repeated attacks, Wilson decided to snap her back and finish her off, only to realize later that Vanessa was actually dodging attacks from another assailant behind Wilson to save her. As Vanessa died her second death in Wilson's arm, the Kingpin was overwhelmed with guilt and plunged himself deeper into crime. Vanessa was resurrected a second time, and this time by the supervillain Jackal, the genetic clone of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. But this was simply a clone of Vanessa, created to entice Wilson Fisk into funding the Jackal's enterprise, New U Technology, which was a terrible attempt at introducing cloning technology into the world. But Wilson was disgusted by the cloned Vanessa and promptly snapped her neck, claiming that the duplicate Vanessa tainted Wilson's last memories of his wife. What was Vanessa Fisk's dependency on pills? The cloned version of Vanessa, created by the Jackal, relied on the New You pills to prevent herself from degenerating. She had to take one every day to ensure her survival. New You technology had not perfected the cloning technique yet, and they advised all their subjects to continue taking the New You pill to prevent their bodies from breaking down as a side effect of the cloning flaw. In the Amazing Spider-Man comic, the Jackal confessed that the cellular degradation was introduced intentionally, kind of like an insurance policy, so that the subjects would remain loyal to New You's business. Marvelous verdict. So, folks, that's all we have on Vanessa Fisk for now. She has quite a complicated and tragic comic book history, starting with becoming the Kingpin's wife, and then handling his empire, and then murdering her own son to protect Wilson Fisk. In Daredevil Born Again, she brings her cold and calculating personality to the forefront. She lets tragedy take a back seat, and prioritizes her own boss lady persona over the Kingpin's random whim, becoming one of the most interesting and yet mysterious characters on the show. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked our video, please check out our other Daredevil Born Again related explainers on the channel, and stay tuned for more marvelous content. See you super soon. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.